Welcome to Show Me the Money with Michael.derk. Show Me the Money is a podcast that is bringing in industry leaders in the commercial real estate sector that are either on the financing side, the development side, the acquisition side, disposition, brokers, investors, bankers, management companies, everyone that's in and out of the business and all facets of the trade, so that hopefully you can benefit if you're looking to grow your business, start your business, or maybe transition into something else.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Michael.derk with another episode. We have today a guest by the name of George Koiso, who's one of the most well-renowned appraisers in all of California. George Koiso is an MAI as a principal and senior managing director for Worth Valuations. With over 20 years of valuation experience and having managed the production of thousands of appraisals, Mr. Koiso has established a reputation for being one of the most trusted appraisers in Southern California, and I can personally definitely vouch for that. Prior to co-founding Worth Valuations, Mr. Koiso spent 14 years with C.B. Richard Ellis Valuation and Advisory Services. He began his career as a trainee and was eventually promoted to the head of the LA apartment team. Mr. Koiso specializes in multifamily residential properties. He has significant experience with Class A institutional quality assets, both existing and proposed, having worked in many of the highest profile assets in Southern California. Mr. Koiso also specializes in affordable housing, small balance agency financing, including value add and bridge assignments, and have exceptional track record for managing very large portfolio assignments. He also served as an expert witness for property tax appeal purposes, having been involved with over 100 tax appeal cases. He has mentored individuals throughout his career. Under his leadership, 8 professionals under 30 years old have obtained their California certified license under him. He also, as an instructor at UCLA Extension, teaching real estate appraisal. George, welcome to the show. Thank you again for being here. I've known you for many years. We've worked on a ton of projects together, and it's always good to banter back and forth about the biz. And I'd like all the audience here to kind of hear firsthand what actually happens behind the curtain, because everyone hears about the appraiser and they see him out of the properties, but then what happens with that report? Who does it go to? The review process, the final valuation, both from the underwriting, NOI profile, as well as from an LTV purpose that we're always looking at. So maybe if we could start off, George, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've seen, maybe Q4 into Q1 right now of Q4 24, Q1 25. What, from your seat, what are you seeing right now? What is happening as far as maybe a little bit on cap rates, NOIs, just in general in the market from your perspective?
Sure. First and foremost, just want to thank you for having me. We've obviously done tons and tons of deals together, and it's always been a pleasure working with you. Just easy, get right to the chase, and really happy to be here. But in terms of the market, I would just say the thing that's most notable for me right now is that the appraisal volume has definitely picked up a lot in Q1 of 2025. That's kind of surprising because, as you know, traditionally fourth quarter is our busy season, and Q1 is usually a really slow period, but it's feeling a lot more like a Q4 than a Q1 right now.
And George, when you're saying, I don't mean to cut you off, but when you're saying it's picking up, are the lenders picking up on that side of it, or the principals? Because lenders obviously do their own valuations internally on the servicing aspect, or are these new assignments for refinances or purchases?
Yeah, I just mean in terms of all appraisal volume, but a lot of that is driven by refinances. We do a lot of appraisals for lending work. So, as you know, we're doing a lot more work together, but we're also doing a lot more work with a lot of other people. Particularly the Marcus and Millichap guys seem to all be kind of, the volume seems to be pretty heavy for everybody, quite frankly. But yeah, we are getting more stuff too in terms of other kinds of valuation work, like they call it internal monitoring purposes. But when you're addressing it to an attorney, you kind of know that some of these things are going to start getting taken back. So there's been an uptick in that kind of work, and we're also helping consult on deals that get trickier or something like that. But I mean, still, the bulk of our work is by far and away for financing purposes, and we've seen that increase quite a bit.
Excellent. Good. And are you seeing the biggest uptick? Because from our standpoint, the agency financing obviously directly correlated to treasury bills. I would say as far as multifamily goes, that's the biggest uptick we've seen in that volume, which is primarily for the larger deals. The small balance, they have that program as well. But
Yep.
as far as that goes, as far as the banks and credit unions and whatnot, the rates are still a little bit wide, relatively speaking. But maybe if you could touch on which lenders are the ones who are actively, jumping into the space more so today.
Yeah, I mean, for us, most of the volume on our end is just coming from balance sheet banks. So that's what we're seeing. The biggest.
So not the agency. So you're coming. Yours is bank execution.
Yeah, agency's a little tough because they tend to want to go to the larger firms. I mean, we're on a lot of approved lists for different agency lenders as well, but it's hard to compare apples to apples because as an independent firm, they really want to drive their assignments to like a single point of contact anywhere in the nation. So I can't really say that, but when I look at the lending reports, even there, I see a lot of work coming from the balance sheet banks as opposed from agencies. So.
Right. Yeah. And from our perspective too, we're seeing a lot of the banks get more active. We're seeing credit unions, but the agencies right now, we got a deal this morning with an all-in rate, at 5.19 on a 7-year fix, 7 years IO. And even depending on the deal, depending on the affordability component, you can have deals today in the high fours. I mean, if you can't make a deal pencil at those levels, it's probably not going to be penciling, again. So the execution is not there from the principals aspect, or the property was just purchased at such a high level, it's going to be difficult. And the thing that we're seeing right now on all the underwriting for each deal is each of the expense line items have gone up exponentially, from insurance to trash to payroll. And it's just, there's so many items right now that are just continually going up the expense load. And I see rents relatively flat across the board, and we're starting to see NOIs really, really drop. And then one thing I want to kind of get into too, that's what we're seeing. But as far as cap rates, cap rates going up, NOIs going down, but most people feel that their property values are the same as what it was a few years ago. And we kind of shake our head and we just give them the math and we just ask them for an explanation, and it usually gets very quiet. So I feel that it's definitely 110% a buyer's market today. There is no doubt about it. And the buyer is definitely in the driver's seat. That's what we're seeing from our perspective right now. We are very active from commercial banks, credit unions, agencies, debt funds. Everybody's active. There is a ton of capital out there right now. There is no excuse not to have a lender step up for your deal. Again, if it doesn't work, there's an issue with the deal. It's not an issue with the lenders out there, because there is a ton of them. So with that being said, where do you see valuations for properties going this year, George, for the next 6 to 7 months, for the remainder of the year? What is your perception on that? What are you looking at on cap rates today, and where do you foresee them going in, say, the next 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my standpoint, I think that they'll be stable to potentially increasing because, look, I think that there's going to be a lot of deals that still have to get worked out and kind of through the system, and there's been a lot of sort of extend and pretend. So that's going to have, those assets are going to have to get worked out. But I mean, ultimately, what we're seeing is still sellers. There has to be a willing seller. So one thing to preface this is, from an appraiser standpoint, our strike zone is really willing seller and willing buyer. So, when you have these duress sales, which we've already seen some of these over the last few years, I mean, the cap rates can really spike up, buyers want to buy at 6 or above, sellers want to sell at 5 or below. Let's just say on the institutional side, not necessarily private client.
And George, I just want to preface it too, is when you're talking about the cap rates, I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So talking about cap rates at a fully stabilized asset versus a going in cap rate versus the exit, because the going in cap rates, even some deals today are in the fours because there's so much upside, rents are way below market, that would really lend itself to more of a bridge execution versus a fully stabilized asset today. So I guess maybe I should have questioned that a little bit differently, ask you that. But on a fully stabilized asset, where are those cap rates? That's maybe a better question for you.
Yeah, and Dirk, as you know, I mean, LA or Southern California, I mean, there's like 100 submarkets, right? So it's hard if we're looking at small deals, the cap rate ranges are all over the place. But that's why if I look at the institutional markets, there's a lot more consistency across the board, not just in Southern California, but all of California as a whole. And where the market's sort of been up until now is that the sellers want to sell at like a 5 cap or below. The buyers want to buy at 6 cap or above. And then we've had all of that stuff in between, right? We've had cap rates that have been north of 6 and we've had cap rates sub 5. So where is the strike zone at the end of the day? And, there are still a lot, we to come up with market value, we have to have a willing seller. And I mean, ultimately, even when we talk to brokers and they say, well, we think the cap rate would be 5.5 to 6. Well, that's what they could sell the asset at. But ultimately, is there somebody to sell the asset at that price point? And when you look at the decrease in volume, it sort of suggests that, there aren't that many willing sellers that want to sell into this market. So oftentimes the sellers that we do see, they're exiting the market. There's a lot of sales where people either had to exit the market, wanted to exit the market, or they were forced to sell. And those, in my opinion, they don't really qualify as a market value. So, the question was, where do I think values are going to go? And I think where the market values will go is, I think that they'll remain relatively stable. Now, with that being said, the big X factor, and as you know, in the great financial recession, it was jobs, right? I mean, when you had a spike in unemployment, that caused occupancies to go down, and that puts a lot of pressure on sellers to sell. And we haven't seen that. But to your point about NOI, there's been a degradation in NOI, in addition to all the things you talked about in terms of insurance and R&M and payroll and all these items that continue to increase. We're also in LA coming off of the rent moratoriums and the eviction moratoriums and the rent freezes, right? So there's been a lot of challenges in the market. And as a result, we've really seen that's really the game that the operators and the owners are playing, which is how do they increase NOI? And, we're seeing a lot of different creative solutions to that.
Right. Yeah, I think, in talking about the expenses, it is what it is. I mean, you can only manage your expenses so much. Your fixed costs, your taxes, your insurance, right? Your payroll costs. I mean, I don't know. I mean, supplies, everything costs more. But the biggest thing, obviously, on that income side of it, that's a huge factor. So I think what we're going to start to see, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but we're going to start to see a lot of billbacks. The rubs are going to be just ferocious across the board from all different types of assets. Probably people used to only do it on larger deals of, say, it only made sense to put rubs on, say, 40 or 50 units or more. But I think now you're going to see it for maybe down to something as low as 10 units, because the exponential cost on all of those, utilities and everything else that you can potentially rub back and maybe do separate parking agreements, whatever it is, that really helps the landlord, because it's really just been a one-way street. In LA, the moratoriums, the rent restrictions, it's been an absolute killer. Every mortgage payment is due the first of the month. Every expense has gone through the roof, and you can't go ahead and raise rents and even collect for some people that are, claiming that they can't pay. And some people obviously can't pay, and some people can. They're just bucking the system. So it's, it's interesting to see how this will shake out. But so in your perspective, you were talking between a 5 and a 6 cap. So in your opinion today, you think a great quality asset, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but say something really prime location in LA, fully stabilized. What is that? What's that cap rate today?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's right around a 5, give or take 25 basis points.
5. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. And so we're still well in the negative leverage, because even with interest rates between 5.5% and 6%, you're still putting 35 to 45% down on real underwriting, and your interest rate is higher than your cap rate. So that's why, again, I just feel this is still a buyer's market, and sellers who really have to meet the market will find out the true value of their property, what someone's willing to pay for it.
Yeah, and with that being said too, it's like, it's a 5 cap, but oftentimes, like you said, there's like upside in the deal, so you kind of have to preface that. There could be other exits involved too. I mean, one thing that we're seeing more of right now that I haven't seen in a long time, well over 10 years, is, there's sort of a reemergence of the condominium sort of model.
Oh, really?
And
You mean to
yeah,
convert the apartments into condos?
yeah, either they have existing track maps already. I mean, they pretty much have existing track maps, but we're starting to see that model start to come back. And I mean, it's been a long time, right, since
It
we've
has.
done sort
Well,
of
since the last crash. Yeah,
pretty
since
much, yeah, since the last crash.
subprime.
It
I
hasn't
remember.
really been since the last crash. But yeah,
Yeah.
we've worked on about a half a dozen of those just in the last probably 6 months or something.
Okay, got it. That's how you definitely paid a premium for the apartments, because if you have to underwrite it on a potential sale basis, it could be good. If rates come down for single families, but single family mortgage rates at 7% today, it's way cheaper to rent than it is to own with your mortgage. If you're not putting at least 20% down, you have PMI, you have insurance. The renters really are on the driver's seat too, from that perspective, versus putting down a large down payment and paying a mortgage payment that's higher than what you'd be renting that unit for. But obviously, more power to the owners if they can pull that off and sell those units off. But from a lender's perspective, I think they're going to be very cautious, and they're going to underwrite the deal, I know firsthand, based on a break even from an apartment basis, and making sure they don't overlend, because a lot of lenders got absolutely crushed on overlending on a lot of these condo conversions, especially in San Diego, where there was a huge conversion from those beautiful apartments into condos. And obviously, when you only sell half, you have a broken condo. Who controls the HOA? It's a conundrum at the end of the day if you don't execute that business plan. But if rates keep falling down, maybe that is another plan that can be executed. But the other thing too is, George, you've had such a great career with CB Richard Ellis. Now you've started your own company. Maybe if you can touch a little bit on what it was like to start your own company, and how hard that is, because a lot of people are always, me being with a big company, Marcus Millichap now for 23 years, it's people always talk about like, oh, why don't you just go start your own company? It's like, well, you got 50 things to do it, right? So what was that like, number one? And number two, how did you become, so trusted? And I love working with you, George. And so how'd you become so trusted from all the different lenders out there and principals to have such a great name in the business? What allowed you to do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, I mean, really appreciate the positive viewpoint on your side. I mean, in terms of starting my own firm, or it's not my own firm. I have partners at the firm, but it's been a challenge. For me, when I was at CBRE, I was sort of, I had grown this team. It was pretty big. I mean, your typical appraisal team is like 2 senior people and maybe one junior, or maybe you have 3 people under you. I mean, we had grown the team to 15 people. So it was pretty massive by industry standards. And, the system is not really designed for it to continue to grow beyond that. And, I mean, ultimately, we just made a decision to create something that was more my partner and I. My primary partner is Pedro Chin. And, he's sort of like a super technician. He's one of the smartest appraisers I've ever met, quite frankly, throughout the whole industry. And, I think it just came to a time where it's like, okay, I could predict the next 20 years of my life, and it would be a great situation, or, kind of start from the bottom of the mountain and kind of challenge myself. And I'm just the type of person that I guess it's a blessing and a curse in some ways. I can't just like coast to the finish line if it's like 20 more years. So
Right.
I had the support of my partners, and they really wanted to get going. And so I said, okay, let's do it. And we sort of just just jumped right into it. It's been a challenge. As you know, we're starting
Right.
up the firm over the last 3 years. And it's certainly had its ups and its downs, but I mean, at the end of the day, I couldn't be happier.
Good for you.
Um,
And there's so much that goes into it, George. I mean, there's the technology aspect of it. There's the
yep,
accounting aspect, right? There's the legal aspect. I mean,
yep,
there's all these different aspects that people don't understand when they're working for one of these big firms and they have all this taken care of for them. And then you have to go off and start your own and have your own people and deal with your own HR and your own payroll and your own tech support and all these things. I mean, there's a lot, right? And so my hat's off to you for going to do that and getting that done, because you're always weighing out like what's the percentage I'm making at this company versus making 100% at the company you started. But are you really making 100% at the end of the day, because you have that overhead and payroll and everything else that you have to, the ancillary items that you have to set up? So it's great that you were able to do it. My hat's off to you for that success. I'm really happy for you and your partners. Um, Moving on to, you appraise all different types of properties. We talked about affordable housing, small little mom and pop, apartment buildings to large institutional class A. What do you find to be the most challenging to appraise and why?
yeah, it's definitely land valuations here in Southern California and Los Angeles. I mean, I would say up until about 10 years ago, valuing land was relatively simple. It was just R2, R3, R4 density. And for those, that don't know what that means, it just means that, it was like 1 per 800 square feet of land of density that you could build, or 1 per 600, 1 per 400. And that's really all the options that there were. But then we got the TOC, and that sort of changed things. And then, state density up until about 10 years ago, it really didn't change that much, maybe once per year. But over the last 4 years, it's changed at least 4 times per year. And sometimes it's changing substantially more than that, to the point where developers aren't even keeping track with, what they can build. And, we found that really surprising when the developers can't keep up with all the changes. And so, even before they start construction, I mean, we're seeing developers that are changing their development plans, right in the middle of it. Some keep moving forward because they don't want to go through another process of revisions. And then, add to that, now we have EV1, and that sort of adds a whole new layer. So, when we were valuing land before, it was very simple. We would just compare the same density to the same density, and we would compare price per unit. But then that sort of changed to, price per max FAR. But then it became obvious that developers couldn't develop to that max FAR. So now we don't even really oftentimes have apples to apples comparisons. So, I mean, it's really like kind of like valuing subdivision land, where the comparable sales, they're there, but how much do they really tell you? So you're almost having to run a residual approach on any land deal to really kind of get an idea of what that land is worth. And these are the questions that people reach out to us, about, hey, can you help us with this land value? And the reality is, it's a lot more complicated than just, looking at some land sales. And then the other component that's been really tricky and increasingly more complex is the affordable space. Um, maybe a complex affordable deal might have 2 to 3 regulatory agreements on it, a light tech thing or something. But there's been so many more supportive services that are added onto these projects now. Pedra just did an affordable project that had 20 regulatory agreements. I mean, I've never seen anything
Wow.
like that.
I've never even
So
heard of something like that.
I know it's
That's
wild.
gotta that's got to be brutal to evaluate that type of deal, because probably a lot of them are contradict each other too.
Exactly.
Wow.
So yeah, I
Well,
think
that's
land affordable has definitely been the most complex.
most complex. Yeah. And I guess, I mean, if you can work through this red tape, if you can, make sense of some of these transactions, maybe they'll work at the end of the day. But I gotta think to make a deal pencil today for construction, the costs alone, the land costs, the loan costs today, whether you're lending at SOFR or prime, it's got to be pretty inhibitive to be able to build something today and make it pencil again on that exit. If you're seeing rents relatively flat, they're probably projecting on construction today pretty high rents. And the other thing is too, George, I don't know what you're seeing on pro forma rents, but the consumers are getting squeezed today with the cost of living that's gone literally through the roof over the last 2 or 3 years. I guess how much more can people really afford to pay for rent at the end of the day? And I see it firsthand. I travel all over the country, and I'm just seeing rents relatively flat because, again, I don't know how much more people can afford at the end of the day. So I don't know if you're seeing that from your side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really depends. So, I mean, I'll give you an example. I think, let's say if you're building, a high density project that requires subterranean parking in LA, and you're in a market that has a lot of supply coming on, I could definitely see feasibility challenges with those kind of projects. But we're seeing more projects in suburban locations or locations that maybe had a certain amount of pent up demand. And, when you run the math on it, and maybe in these kind of markets that have pent up demand, the rents aren't necessarily going down, or, you would project them to be stable. And then they're building, like a wrap project where they have the construction cost relative, like at the low end of the construction range.
Right.
We're seeing a lot of those projects continuing to pencil, right? I mean, these are sort of the markets that benefited post COVID, right? The non sort of urban areas, and we're seeing a lot of those projects continuing to be feasible, and they're on the borderline, but again, a lot of it's dependent on the cost as well.
Right. And I know some, I know the exact terminology. I'm not a builder, but some builders are actually using those prefabricated, you know, um, buildings, like bringing it in pieces and kind of putting it together as Lego sets. And I think
Yep.
that's a huge saving cost. That's number one. And number two, I think as a developer today, they're probably going to build the smallest unit they can, right? So they can pack as many units as possible. I'm finding on newer construction that we've been working on, the units just seem a lot smaller. The ceiling height's great, that's for sure, but the unit itself, it seems like the square footage has definitely gone down versus what that same building would have been 10 or 20 years ago. I think that square footage is probably down at least 20%. And so I think that's how they're justifying some of these, rents as well, and can pack more units, and that way it's not as diluted to the NOI that's really hurting the project.
Yeah, again, I think it depends on where you're at, right? I mean, again, Southern California has 100 submarkets, right? So
Right.
maybe the project you described, might be something we would see in Koreatown, that, they're trying to fill everything up with
High
Section 8
density.
voucher tenants. But if you go to, let's say, the Inland Empire, a suburban market, they were developing mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms in certain submarkets out there. But with more people not being able to get into homes, there's like this increase in demand for 3 bedroom units and 1 bedroom units. So,
Right.
and because there's more single people and there's more families that can't get into homes.
Right.
And if you look at the existing inventory, it'll all be, almost all of it is 1 and 2 bedrooms. So, in those 3 bedroom units, the average unit size is actually going up in some of those projects. So it really just depends, but
Sure.
yeah,
That's an
Koreatown.
excellent, yeah, point well taken. I love it. Yeah, because 3 bedrooms, and I mean, I'm working on a deal in LA right now that it has some 3 and 4 bedroom townhouses, on this particular deal. And I'm like, whoa, those are, I mean, the 3 bedroom units are 1,200 square feet. The 4 bedroom units are 1,600 square feet. I mean, those effectively are like homes. And
Correct.
so you mitigate as a renter, you don't have to come up with a down payment. You can go ahead and bifurcate that rent between the different people that are in each of the units. Or if it is a family, it's much more affordable, to have that everyone under one roof instead of separated out into multiple units. So yeah, I do agree with that. So, um, George, you've mentored a lot of people over your career and a very successful career it's been. What are some of the pieces of advice that you would share with someone who's looking to start in commercial real estate today, or get into appraisal or get into any aspect of the business? What would you tell them today?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would tell somebody is that they have to work really hard. And look, if I have to tell you you have to work really hard, I don't think you're even going to make it, quite frankly. I mean, it's such it's such a precondition, right? And so I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand is like, the guys who are successful in commercial real estate, I mean, they're working a lot. And, I had a chance to work with the most successful people, the vice chairmen, people like you. I mean, we're calling each other on Saturdays, trying to help each other out or whatever it is. I talk to people on vacation. I've talked to people while on vacation. I've talked to people, some brokers, calling me back at 11:30 at night so that we can wrap up the deal so that they can, close their transaction. I mean, I've seen it all. And I think that there's a misconception that somehow people who are at the top of the mountain aren't working all the time. And that's just not, that hasn't been true from what I've seen. And so I think that's the first thing. But then once you, let's say, work for somebody, then it's buy-in, right? It's like, hey, if somebody's going to come work for Michael.derk, like they shouldn't be thinking like they should just buy in, right? And then just, hey, you got all this work you got to do. And if they come in, they buy in and they just work just work really hard, then they're going to learn a lot more working for somebody experienced. But sometimes you have sort of the people not really sure, and so I mean it really kind of slows their own career path down, in my opinion. But the actual skill, the number one skill, I think that somebody who needs to be successful is to have really great listening skills. So, it's like attention is such an important thing, right? And so if you're, let's say, a business owner, you got to get the attention of your clients. If you're a teacher, you got to get the attention of your students. If you're a boss, you got to get the attention of your staff. So from my standpoint, attention is the first point of attack is like, do I have the attention of the person on the other side? But the other side, if I'm giving somebody advice is to pay very close attention to the people that, that are successful. And, if you have great listening skills, that's the first step you need in order to execute. And as you know, Derk, hey, when you're dealing with your clients, hey, you got to pay attention to everything they're saying,
Yes.
and in order to execute what they need. And so if you don't have that first skill, then it becomes very difficult because you're either guessing or you're sort of doing what the client or the market wants. And so the listening skills, I've had the opportunity to be around a lot of great leaders within the industry. And, we had an awesome panel, between the Berkeley Alumni Real Estate Association and the USC Alumni Association. We had over 100 people show up on a Wednesday night. We had great panelists, I mean, market leaders, and I was shocked at how much they were listening to each other. I mean, any one of them, we could have built an entire panel around, and they were really listening carefully to each other. And I learned a great lesson that day is that, I knew the listening skills were critical, but I saw it amongst, many leaders listening to one another and what they had to say. And that's probably the number one thing I think that people don't understand is to be a great leader and to be a great professional, you have to be a great listener.
Right. I couldn't agree with everything you said. I echo everything you said. And I think younger people coming into business today too, if you're not looking to roll up your sleeves and work, I think realistically to be successful in this business, it's a 6 days right now. It's 6 days is what I'm seeing. I mean, I'm personally doing that as well. And after 26 years of this business now, vacations, sure, go take them. But it's vacation for me is just, it's a nice place to work. That's how I look at it, to take my kids, whatever. And they're enjoying it. It's great for them. And I love it, but I'm just working in a nice place. That's all I'm doing. So it's a different deal, but some people totally unplug, which is great if they can do it. But being on call and on commission and, showing up for clients when they need something and being there thick and thin, it's a question of, is that client going to call someone else? Are they going to work with another appraisal group? Are they going to work with another financing team? Are they going to work with another investment broker? When someone needs something, someone very powerful in the business, someone who executes and expects answers at a given time, those windows get pretty short, and that becomes an opportunity cost of sacrificing parts of your life that you may want to have very free flowing and be able to unplug, or, nose of the grindstone and be able to, hit it hard for at least 6 days a week. So I completely agree with you.
Hey,
Um,
just a quick story on that, though, as
yeah.
a follow up. I remember the first time I was in Puerto Rico on vacation, and I was on a boat on my way to a private island, responding to clients on, the BlackBerry at that time,
Oh, I love the black.
and realizing they had no idea where I was, and I could still generate income anywhere around the world. It was sort of like this epiphany that I was like, oh my god, this is amazing.
Right.
Like here I am staring at this beautiful, on the boat with, friends and family, and keeping it moving. And I thought, oh man, this is awesome. And for me, I don't even look at it as anything that is taken away from me either. I enjoy the moments with my family, and there are certain times that are completely blocked off. But if I'm on a boat, just sort of hanging out, and I'm just keeping things moving, I don't feel like that's taking anything away from me.
Right. And it's a great luxury that we're able to do that, George, with our business, where, I just over the last 2 weeks, I think I was in 6 different cities around the US, working with clients, working on deals, took a little trip, with the kids and everything. And so it's great. We can just, and my clients don't, they think I'm in the office. I'm not in the office. I'm there. I'm not there. I just show up. It's, we can be anywhere at any given point in time, but to be accessible with technology today is key. I think for younger people, the technology is always there at their fingertips, but sometimes to not be as accessible for people sometimes is a little challenging and cost them for future deals. George, moving on to my favorite part of the show is very successful people like yourself who've been on here, and people have had very big wins and successes in their careers. And they've also had very low points, whether it's in their career or personal life. Can you share that so that it really makes you more of a human in front of all the audience here, and talk about the failure or the fall, and more importantly, how you got back up?
Yeah, I mean, look, the career high for me, I'm still living it. Like I said, I'm continuously just trying to challenge myself, and for me, opening up Worth was an extremely like scary experience. Like I said, I mean, I had optimized everything in an environment and sort of, effectively got into the top of that mountain. I mean, it's the position everybody fights for, and I actually got it. And to kind of walk away from that security, it was it challenged my emotions a little bit. But it's been extremely gratifying. And they say that good is the enemy of great, right? And I had a really good situation. It was even better than good, but opening up Worth is an opportunity to kind of go for the great. And despite the economic challenges over the last few years, it's been a very fulfilling experience for me. And we have a great team. I just want to keep focusing on building that team, like I always have. And yeah, I mean, it's a pleasure to come into work every single day and just have like an amazing group of people that are almost like they're like more than coworkers or something. And it's just like an extension of life. So it's been really, really awesome. In terms of lows, I would say, 6, 7 years into my career, I was still working 60, 80 hours a week. I mean, out working all of my peer group. And I remember there was a point at which I was like, I can't believe like I still have to work this hard, even after this many years. And I was thinking about leaving the firm or even leaving the industry as a whole. And I talked to my father about this. And I remember him telling me, hey, George, I know exactly what you're going through. He had worked at a Big Ten accounting firm at that time, and he had a very similar experience. And he basically said, whatever you do, you got to go through this problem. You have to just keep going through it. And so, my body and mind and emotions are telling me, hey, I got to tap out. And he told me, whatever you do, don't do that. And it's the best experience I ever had because it kind of taught me, it kind of leveled up my resilience level. to the point where it's like, okay, it just evened me out in terms of highs and lows. But actually, that's not that's sort of a good story, I guess. But the biggest low I've encountered sort of professionally and personally is, we had actually just started Worth, and my wife was pregnant, and we were sort of trying to time it so that we launched before the birth of our first child, and 2 days before her scheduled induction, we actually lost our first child.
Oh.
And so, we were trying to, you're trying to manage the grief of this terrible experience. I mean, and but you have a company and you have employees that are sort of relying on you, so you can't just disappear from the situation. And I can talk about it because we're very grateful. I mean, ever since then, we've actually had the birth of our son, who's been sort of a joy every single moment.
Well,
and thank you, appreciate that. And I know the loss of our daughter was a very sad story, but what it taught me was it sort of just it taught me that we just have to keep moving forward. We have to have faith. We have to continue to believe. My wife and I, we had actually been trying for over a decade for Jordana. And, it was obviously a gigantic punch to our face, but we never lost faith. We kept moving forward. And against all odds, we actually had our son. And so, again, just sort of kind of having that resilience, having that belief, having that faith that everything will work out has it's just continued to teach me that's what's important in life. So.
Right. Well, that's a lot, George. That's a lot to take in, and I'm sorry for the loss, but I'm also super, just kind of a little bit speechless right now. But it's a blessing to have your son, and I wish you the best for your family. That's a lot, but that's the thing, and I personally is sharing something too, and I've never done this on my show, but I went through a very tough time as well over the last couple of years through a very, very difficult divorce. And, I don't share that with people or tell anybody that, but, day in and day out, I didn't want to let my clients down. I didn't want to let my team down. Same thing like with you, George. And so there's always going to be roadblocks out there, right? That come up no matter what it is, whether it's something personally, health wise, legal wise, whatever it is. I mean, things happen in life. Life is not perfect. If anybody thinks that, then they're obviously delusional and haven't been through life and haven't had enough experience. But things happen, and it's a matter of not about getting knocked down, because I guarantee you will be knocked down. It's just a matter of how hard, but it's about getting back up and making yourself that much stronger. So obviously, George, that you've done that. You've started a great, successful firm. Couldn't be happier to have work with you now, and we'll be working with you in the future. So, my hat's off to you, and to you and your family, and to all your business partners. And I wish you the very best. Maybe as a wrap here, what do you foresee happening, for the remainder of the year? Do you think volume is going to continue to pick up? Do you think it's going to be volatile? Do you think it's going to be slower? With debt rolling onto these adjustable rate loans and interest only burning off, do you think that's going to have a pretty big impact, or what's your thought, just to kind of a wrap here on more of a business note?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic about 2025 in terms of transaction volume. Like I said, I mean, it's been like a fourth quarter for us in the first quarter of 2025. And what people are telling me is even with a relatively small drop in interest rates, they think that, a lot of deals are going to pencil. So, I guess it just sort of depends on what happens with interest rates. But overall, I mean, I think that the worst is behind us. And not to say that, there's not going to be challenges ahead. There's going to always be challenges in front of us, but we just have to continue to adapt and navigate through them, just like everybody is doing, the owners are doing,
Right.
we're doing, whether it's in our professional or personal lives. It's just really about adapting. So, but overall, I'm very optimistic about what I'm, the start to 2025 and moving into 2025.
That's great. I couldn't echo the same. I mean, I'm definitely, as I'm saying, I do echo the same, not that I don't. We are seeing a ton of activity right now as of late over the last couple of weeks. And I think the volatility, it's going to be volatile. It's going to be bumps and bruises everywhere, but it's going to create huge opportunities. So that's what we're seeing. And our biggest clients are still staying active, still refinancing, still purchasing property, writing offers and doing deals. So bottom line is there's a ton of capital out there and deals are going to trade and transact, whether it be at the seller's price, buyer's price, or somewhere in the middle. These deals are getting done and it's going down right now as we speak. So we're, again, George, thank you for coming on the show. It was a true honor to have you here. And I wish you continued success in your business and all the best for you and your family. And so that's a wrap. So everyone have a great day. Thank you again, George Koiso. If you have any questions, this will be posted on all of the usual sites. Reach out to him for any valuation on your properties. And George is a great resource for him and his partners to help you out in your valuation. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Take care. Goodbye.
Thanks, Dirk.